Great. Thank you, Liz. And as you can see, I'm Chris, not Debbie, but I do want to thank Debbie for taking the lead on putting together this presentation. Do I have control? I'm sorry. I'm sharing screen, but I don't seem to have. Okay, now I do. Thanks. I'm going to talk a bit about the STPA advocacy surrounding the Plastics Treaty, where we are, where we want to go, and how do we get there. Just a note on acronyms. You've heard INC a lot. INC stands for Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. It's the equivalent of the INBs in the FCTC process, for those of you who were around at that time. As you heard, there are 5 planned INCs to finish the negotiations of this treaty. One is done, the second is coming up next month, and by the end of 2024, they hope to have a final text that they can take to the World Environment Assembly for adoption. I also want to note that the INC, like the FCTC process, requires NGOs to apply for observer status from either UNEP or ECOSOC in order to attend negotiations. The STPA does not have status, but 7 organizations that are members of the STPA do. So there are plenty of slots for folks to attend. Let's start with the stakeholders. For those of you with experience with the FCTC, the main difference is the presence of industry. There is no equivalent of Article 5.3, and there's actually little chance that there will be in these negotiations. Tobacco was not openly present at INC 1, but many other transnational companies were, many with a clear conflict of interest. The other 2 major actors are governmental and non-governmental delegations, of course. And then, of course, there's the UNEP staff and the representatives from other intergovernmental organizations, including the World Health Organization. It was really great to see them there. 2 groups are worth pointing out specifically. First, the pickers represent people who go through plastic waste to collect valuable pieces for recycling. They are worried that if many plastics are banned outright, they will lose their source of income. So they are in a similar position as leaf farmers in the FCTC process. And second, the High Ambition Coalition is a self-selected group of countries formed by Norway and Rwanda to push for a strong treaty. Unfortunately, many countries have since joined that group, and some of those countries represent the interests of petrochemical and plastics companies. So it's unclear what the impact of the High Ambition Coalition will be. This diagram shows general positions and where they overlap among stakeholders. To put it very basically, industry wants solutions involving redesign and recycling to protect their profits. NGOs focus on human rights, the polluter pays, and the precautionary principles, and conflicts of interest. Many want to simply ban the most problematic plastics. Government interests vary. Countries that tend to profit from plastics production and trade tend to support industry. Many LMIC countries who get little from plastics except the downstream problems are concerned about funding from north to south to help address the problem. And of course, small island countries are particularly vocal about the impact of plastic pollution on their lives and livelihoods. The tobacco control community via the STPA has developed some key messaging. To put it very simply, we have one goal for the treaty: to get cigarette filters banned. And I noticed there was a question already in the Q&A box about electronic cigarettes. And we're trying to get filters banned under a process where NGOs are want to get plastics that are toxic, problematic from a pollution standpoint, non-essential, and single-use banned. And so, of course, cigarette filters are the poster child for that type of plastic, but that would also include e-cigarette plastic waste. So while we talk about filters a lot because it's a simple message, we do include e-cigarette waste as well. There's already a strong movement to ban such plastics that account for a lot of this pollution. Already the UNEP considers cigarette filters to be in this category, so we're in a good position that way. As part of our efforts so far, we have emphasized that there are serious conflicts of interest and reminded governments that their obligations under FCTC Article 5.3 do apply to these negotiations. There have already been a number of opportunities to provide input to the treaty process. We have submitted written comments, spoken extensively with environmental group allies, and were able to deliver 3 interventions at the first INC. And I believe you can see those interventions on the ASH website. I want to highlight the written intervention from the UN High Commissioner on Human Rights from INC 1, which took a stance quite parallel to ours, including a human rights approach, holding business accountable, putting the environment ahead of profits, and dealing with conflicts of interest. And they specifically cited FCTC Article 5.3, which was very helpful. In your advocacy, it's important to remember the overlap in plastics and tobacco policies and that they can reinforce each other. Government ministries don't always fully communicate with each other, so we should ensure that negotiators know what their governments have already said or done. We also need to keep the tobacco industry from volunteering money for cleanup as a corporate social responsibility scheme. We have the opportunity to end the sale of cigarette filters and perhaps other tobacco product waste, perhaps through this treaty, but we can also take advantage of the conversation around the treaty to work at the national and regional levels. We can't know for sure because it's not been done, but there's very good reason to believe that unfiltered cigarettes would be far less appealing, especially for initiation. And so it might have a big impact on reducing tobacco use. But we need to be careful that filters are not exempted from plastics bans, as they have been in some national cases. Some countries that have banned single-use plastics have not banned cigarette filters. And we also need to prevent the industry again from scoring public relations points by portraying themselves as part of the solution as opposed to the entire source of the problem. I'm just about finished, but I wanted to point out some of the advocacy tools that are available on the STPA website and some other websites. GGTC has created some great tools, such as a calculator for calculating the damage that tobacco product waste does in individual countries, which I think could be very useful for national advocacy. There are also briefing materials, sample letters, and information from INC1. There's further information on the websites of some of STPA's members, such as GDTC, ATCA, and ASH. And of course, feel free to reach out via the Plastics Listserv with questions and ideas. And with that, I will wrap up and thank you all very much for your attention.